Good morning, everybody. How are you all? I'm Nupur. Welcome to my channel, Nature at the Very Core of Science. Today, I'm going to read something which is very interesting. I'm sure everybody is going to have something to say about this topic. Please leave your comment. I would love those, and share if you like it with your friends and families. Let's begin. The values Americans live by. Written by Robert Kohls. Most Americans would have a difficult time telling you specifically what the values are which Americans live by. They have never given the matter any thought. Even if Americans had considered this question, they would probably, in the end, decide not to answer in terms of a definitive list of values. The reason for this decision is itself one very American value. Their belief that every individual is so unique that the same list of values could never be applied to all, or even most, of their fellow citizens. Although Americans may think of themselves as being more varied and unpredictable than they actually are, it is significant that they think they are. Americans tend to think they have been only slightly influenced by family, church, or schools. In the end, each believes, I personally chose which values I want to live my own life by. Despite this self-evaluation, a foreign anthropologist could observe Americans and produce a list of common values which would fit most Americans. The list of typically American values would stand in sharp contrast to the values commonly held by the people of many other countries. We, the staff of the Washington International Center, have been introducing thousands of international visitors to life in the United States for more than a third of a century. This has caused us to try to look at Americans through the eyes of our visitors. We feel confident that the values listed in this booklet describe most, but not all, Americans. Furthermore, we can say that if the foreign visitor really understood how deeply ingrained these 13 values are in Americans, he or she would then be able to understand 95% of American actions. Actions which might otherwise appear strange, confusing, or unbelievable when evaluated from the perspective of the foreigner's own society and its values. The different behaviors of a people or a culture make sense only when seen through the basic beliefs, assumptions, and values of that particular group. When you encounter an action or hear a statement in the United States which surprises you, try to see it as an expression of one or more of the values listed in this booklet. For example, when you ask Americans for directions to get to a particular address in their own city, they may explain in great detail how you can get there on your own, but may never even consider walking 2 city blocks with you to lead you to the place. Some foreign visitors have interpreted this sort of action as showing Americans unfriendliness. We could suggest instead that the self-help concept, which is value number 6 on our list, is so strong in Americans that they firmly believe that no adult would ever want, even temporarily, to be dependent on another. Also, their future orientation, which is value number 8, makes Americans think it is better to prepare you to find other addresses on your own in the future. Before proceeding to the list itself, we should also point out that Americans see all of these values as very positive ones. They are not aware, for example, that the people of many third world countries view change, like value number 2, negative or threatening. In fact, all 13 of these American values are judged by many of the world's citizens as negative and undesirable. Therefore, it is not enough simply to familiarize yourself with these values. You must also, so far as possible, consider them without the negative or derogatory connotation which they might have for you based on your own experience and cultural identity. It is important to state emphatically that our purpose in providing you with this list of the most important American values is not to convert you, the foreign visitor, to our values. We could not achieve that goal even if we wanted to, and we don't want to. We simply want to help you understand the Americans with whom you will be relating from their own value system rather than from yours. There is a brief description about the author Robert Kohls, who is the executive director, the Washington International Center at Washington, D.C., and it was in April 1984 that it was written. So now we will just go in depth about the values Americans live by. 1. Personal control over the environment. Americans no longer believe in the power of fate, and they have come to look at people who do as being backward, primitive, or hopelessly naive. To be called fatalistic is one of the worst criticisms one can receive in the American context. To an American, it means one is superstitious and lazy, unwilling to take any initiative in bringing about improvements. In the United States, people consider it normal and right that man should control nature rather than the other way around. More Americans find it impossible to accept that there are some things which lie beyond their power of humans to achieve. And Americans have literally gone to the moon because they refuse to accept earthly limitations. Americans seem to be challenged, even compelled to do by one means or another, and often at great cost, what 7/8 of the world is certain cannot be done. Second, change. In the American mind, change is seen as an indisputably good condition. Change is strongly linked to development, improvement, progress, and growth. Many older, more traditional cultures consider change as a disruptive, destructive force to be avoided if at all possible. Instead of change, such societies value stability, continuity, tradition, and a rich and ancient heritage, none of which are valued very much in the United States. These first two values, the belief that we can do anything and the belief that any change is good, together with an American belief in the virtue of hard work and the belief that each individual has a responsibility to do the best he or she can do, have helped Americans achieve some great accomplishments. So whether these beliefs are true is really irrelevant. What is important is that Americans have considered them to be true and have acted as if they were thus in effect causing them to happen. Number 3, time and its control. Time is for the average American of utmost importance. To the foreign visitor, Americans seem to be more concerned with getting things accomplished on time, according to a predetermined schedule, than they are with developing deep interpersonal relations. Schedules for the Americans are meant to be planned and then followed in the smallest detail. It may seem to you that most Americans are completely controlled by the little machines they wear on their wrists, cutting their discussions off abruptly to make it to their next appointment on time. Americans' language is filled with references to time, giving a clear indication of how much it is valued. Time is something to be on, to be kept, filled, saved, used, spent, wasted, lost, gained, planned, given, made the most of, even killed. The international visitor soon learns that it is considered very rude to be late, even by 10 minutes, for an appointment in the United States. Whenever it is absolutely impossible to be on time, you should phone ahead and tell the person you have been unavoidably detained and will be a half hour or whatever late. Time is so valued in America because by considering time to be important, one can clearly accomplish more than if one wastes time and doesn't keep busy. This philosophy has proven its worth. It has enabled Americans to be extremely productive, and productivity itself is highly valued in the United States. Many American proverbs stress the value in guarding our time, using it wisely, setting and working toward specific goals, and even expending our time and energy today so that the fruits of our labor may be enjoyed at a later time. This latter concept is called delayed gratification. Number 4, equality and egalitarianism. Equality is for Americans one of their most cherished values. This concept is so important for Americans that they have even given it a religious basis. They say all people have been created equal. Most Americans believe that God views all humans alike without regard to intelligence, physical condition, or economic status. In secular terms, this belief is translated into the assertion that all people have an equal opportunity to succeed in life. Americans differ in opinion about how to make this ideal into a reality. Yet, virtually all agree that equality is an important civic and social goal. The equality concept often makes Americans seem strange to foreign visitors. 7/8 of the world feels quite differently. To them, rank and status and authority are seen as much more desirable considerations, even if they personally happen to find themselves near the bottom of the social order. Class and authority seem to give people in those other societies a sense of security and certainty. People outside the United States consider it reassuring to know from birth who they are and where they fit into the complex system called society. Many highly placed foreign visitors to the United States are insulted by the way they are treated by service personnel, such as waiters in restaurants, clerks in stores, taxi drivers, etc. Americans have an aversion to treating people of high position in a differential manner and conversely often treat lower class people as if they were very important. Newcomers to the United States should realize that no insult or personal indignity is intended by this lack of deference to rank or positions in society. A foreigner should be prepared to be considered as just like anybody else while in the country. Number 5, individualism and privacy. The individualism which has been developed in the Western world since the Renaissance, beginning in the late 15th century, has taken its most exaggerated form in 20th century United States. Here, each individual is seen as completely and marvelously unique, that is, totally different from all other individuals and therefore particularly precious and wonderful. Americans think they are more individualistic in their thoughts and actions than, in fact, they are. They resist being thought of as representative of a homogeneous group. Whatever the group, they may and do join groups, in fact many groups, but somehow believe they are just a little unique, just a little special from other members of the same group, and they tend to leave groups as easily as they entered them. Privacy, the ultimate result of individualism, is perhaps even more difficult for the foreigner to comprehend. The word privacy does not even exist in many languages. If it does, it is likely to have a strongly negative connotation, suggesting loneliness or isolation from the group. In the United States, privacy is not only seen as a very positive condition, but it is also viewed as a requirement which all humans would find equally necessary, desirable, and satisfying. It is not uncommon for Americans to say and believe such statements as, "If I don't have at least half an hour a day to myself, I will go stark raving mad." Individualism as it exists in the United States does mean that you will find absolute freedom to express them anywhere and anytime here. Yet, in spite of this wide range of personal opinion, almost all Americans will ultimately vote for one of the two major political parties. This is what was meant by the statement made earlier that Americans take pride in crediting themselves with claiming more individualism than, in fact, they really have. Number 6, self-help concept. In the United States, a person can take credit only for what he or she has accomplished by himself or herself. Americans get no credit whatsoever for having been born into a rich family. In that United States, that would be considered an accident of birth. Americans pride themselves in having been born poor and through their own sacrifice and hard work having climbed the difficult ladder of success to whatever level they have achieved, all by themselves. The American social system has, of course, made it possible for Americans to move relatively easily up the social ladder. Take a look in an English language dictionary at the composite words that have the word self as a prefix. In the average desk dictionary, there will be more than 100 such words. Words like self-confidence, self-conscious, self-contented, self-control, self-criticism, self-deception, self-defeating, self-denial, self-discipline, self-esteem, self-expression, self-importance, self-improvement, self-interest, self-reliance, self-respect, self-restraint, self-sacrifice. The list can go on and on. The equivalent of these words cannot be found in most other languages. This list is perhaps the best indication of how seriously Americans take doing things for oneself. The self-made man or woman is still very much the ideal in 20th century America. Then competition and free enterprise. Americans believe that competition brings out the best in any individual. They assert that it challenges or forces each person to produce the very best that is humanly possible. Consequently, the foreign visitor will see competition being fostered in the American home and in the American classroom, even on the youngest age levels. Very young children, for instance, are encouraged to answer questions for which their classmates do not know the answers. You may find the competitive value disagreeable, especially if you come from a society which promotes cooperation rather than competition. But many U.S. Peace Corps volunteers teaching in the third world countries found the lack of competitiveness in a classroom situation equally distressing. They soon learned that what they had thought to be one of the universal human characteristics represented only a peculiarly American or Western value. Americans valuing competition have devised an economic system to go with it. Free enterprise. Americans feel very strongly that a highly competitive economy will bring out the best in its people and ultimately that the society which fosters competition will progress most rapidly. If you look for it, you will see evidence in all areas, even in fields as diverse as medicines, the arts, education, and sports, that free enterprise is the approach most often preferred in America. Number 8. Future orientation. Valuing the future and the improvements, Americans are sure the future will bring means that they devalue the past and are, to a large extent, unconscious of the present. Even a happy present goes largely unnoticed because, happy as it may be, Americans have traditionally been hopeful that the future would bring even greater happiness. Almost all energy is directed toward realizing that better future. At best, the present condition is seen as preparatory to a later and greater event which will eventually culminate in something even more worthwhile.